What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Savage Rounds with Xavier. Today for you, I've got the UFC Vegas 78 recap. This was headlined by Luque and RDA. It was a pretty good card. There were a lot of finishes, only a few decisions. Somehow the main event ended up going to decision, but we will talk about that. To start it off, we went 10-3, pretty solid overall. Probably should have been 11-2 with how the Dawodu fight went, but it is what it is. I'll talk about the misses real quick. Amarim and Conejo. I went with Montserrat because I thought early doors she was going to be able to make the takedowns a little bit more difficult and land on the feet, but Amarim's size played a huge part. She was so much bigger than Conejo. The takedowns came pretty easy for Jacqueline Amarim. She ended up looking really good, dominated, was putting a lot of damage on Conejo on the ground, almost had a few submissions. So yeah, pretty dominant overall from Amarim. It was just a miss on Conejo in this one. She was a pretty sizable underdog. And like I said, I just thought she was going to be able to make the grappling a little bit more difficult. A lot more difficult than she did because it was not difficult at all for Amarim. But moving on up, the next miss was Francis Marshall and Isaac Dulgarian. Dulgarian came in 6-0. This was his debut. Really highly touted wrestling prospect who is real violent on the ground, does a lot of damage. He was really fun to watch. And I thought Francis Marshall, with how he looked on Contender Series, he came in, did well, got a win, and then he's lost his most recent two fights, including this Dulgarian one. I thought the little bit of experience and the lack of experience from Dulgarian with also the level of competition Dulgarian's fought. He hasn't fought anybody good on his record yet, obviously other than Marshall now in the UFC. So I thought that was going to play a factor, but Marshall was not able to handle the wrestling and the pressure and the top game from Dulgarian. Dulgarian looked really good, and the prospect was as advertised. Came in and mauled Marshall on the ground. Really good performance, especially being this hyped up for so long. He's been 6-0 and talked about for about a year now, trying to get a fight in the UFC. So for him to live up to that hype, pretty good. Good stuff on his debut. 7-0 now. Next miss, Dawodu and Swanson. This fight was always going to be a close one just because of the way Dawodu fights, but I really thought there was a good case for Dawodu to have 2 rounds. I thought he was up 2-0 going into the third. I know some people had the third for Dawodu as well. I thought that one was obviously a really close round, but I gave it to Swanson. I thought he took it, so I scored a 2-1 Dawodu. I was really surprised that it went unanimous 29-28 to Swanson. When they said unanimous, I was pretty confident Dawodu had got it. Everybody on Twitter was surprised too. There were a few people that thought Swanson won, and I mean, it is the way in which he fights. A lot of his fights are always going to be close when it goes to decision, and I mean that's what it was. He just wasn't able to differentiate himself enough. He didn't make you have to give him the round, which obviously he needed to do, and he wasn't able to. So Cub ends up getting the decision. I scored the fight to Dawodu. I think a lot of people did, but it is what it is. 10-3 on the week, 213, 122-7 on the year, 13-10. We got a win this week for the Savage Rounds Parlay. We went with Damon Blackshear, Martin Budai. They both had first round finishes, made it look pretty easy. Good performances from both guys. So yeah, this week coming up, we'll look to make it 2 in a row. And now let's talk about the winners. Miller and Santos. I picked Santos. Obviously, I didn't think the talent pool on that year of The Ultimate Fighter was great for that division. Miller comes out on top, and even the girl she beat in the final, Brogan Walker, she lost to Lucindo in her debut. She hasn't come back and fought in the UFC again. I don't know what the contract situation is, if she got one or if she was just called in for that fight to give her a chance. I'm not sure. But then Miller comes in. She's lost her 2 fights in the UFC. She's looked awful in both of them, including this one. And I just didn't think there was going to be any way for her to implement her game. She's tall and lanky, and her striking's not good. It's super wily, and her head is open to be hit very easily. Her takedowns aren't great. She's not very physically imposing, but when she gets to fight to the ground, her jiu-jitsu is solid. But I didn't think she was going to be able to get Santos to the ground and on the feet. I didn't think there was really going to be problems for Santos, and that's how it played out. So good win for Santos. First round finish in her debut. I'm pretty sure it was a first round finish. Let me double check. Yeah, first round TKO. Good work from her. Next up, Blackshear versus Jose Johnson. Blackshear was able to get the grappling going. Jose Johnson took this on short notice, and he hasn't fought in quite some time since his Contender Series win. I thought this was a tough matchup for him. He's always struggled against the grappling, and obviously Blackshear is a great wrestler, and he's got great jiu-jitsu. So he was always going to go out there and look to grapple, and yeah, another case of Johnson not being able to deal with it. But yeah, short notice, that is a tough fight. It's on short notice for him, the complete opposite of what you want. But he'll get another opportunity. He's coming in off the Contender Series, so hopefully we get to see him fight off a full camp and see how he does. But a good win for Blackshear. And what went from not the best looking start, now his UFC career doesn't look too bad. He started off with a draw and a loss, and it was looking not like terrible, but it wasn't looking great. Obviously, he'd only lost one, but the draw, obviously you don't want that, and with no wins in 2 fights, not great. But he's come in his last 2 fights and gotten finishes, so he's on a 2-fight finishing win streak, and now he only has 1 loss in 4 fights in the UFC, and that's looking really good. Obviously, if the draw was a win, that would look a lot better, but 4 fights in to his UFC career, 1 loss, that's not bad on your record at all. The next one we got right, Parisian Budai. I mean, this was the easiest minus 200 they could have given us. Even if Budai didn't come out guns blazing in the first round and get the finish, he was very easily going to win a decision there. Parisian has struggled with physical guys before. Parisian doesn't have a good gas tank. His chin is suspect, so over 3 rounds, Budai was going to win the fight regardless, in my opinion. But Budai came out. He said he wasn't happy with any of his UFC performances, even though he's been undefeated so far. He wasn't happy with any of the performances, and he wanted to show what he could really do. He came out, like I said, guns blazing, got the first round finish, and looked really good doing it. So, good stuff from Martin Budai, and I think there's a chance he gets a ranked fight. 4-0 in the UFC. The heavyweight division is not deep. You'll see what matchup I give him tomorrow when I do matchups. But yeah, I do think there's a chance he could squeeze into that top 15 after his next fight. Or with a win against a ranked opponent in his next fight, if they give that to him. Next up, one we hit on, Terrence McKinney versus Mike Breeden. Another short notice opponent here. This was tough for Mike Breeden. His grappling defense, or his wrestling defense and his grappling has never been his strong suit. So I think he was worried about Terrence McKinney. And I say another short notice fight like it was Mike Breeden coming in on short notice. It was Terrence McKinney taking it on short notice, and he got the win. But yeah, I think Breeden was worried about the grappling from McKinney. He came out to strike and get it done quickly. I don't think Breeden's the highest level MMA fighter just in general, so McKinney was able to go out there and put it on him. Breeden didn't like the pressure. He got touched a few times and ended up with McKinney getting the first round finish. So good work from McKinney. Finally, or not finally, but after a little 2-fight skid against some tough opponents. They were tough guys. I was looking at this earlier. Where is he? Terrence McKinney, Sadyakov, and Bonfim. Yeah. So I mean, he's 2-3 in his last 5. The losses are Sadyakov, Bonfim, and Drew Dober. So they're tough losses. He beats guys around his level or just a bit below the top guys, but he's struggled with the top guys. So hopefully they don't toss him right back up there to somebody really good. They let him fight a few guys around this level, get some more wins under his belt. Hopefully he can go on a little streak, and we'll see what he can do. Next up, Marcus McGee versus JP Buys. again, short notice, if I'm not mistaken. JP Buys taking this on short notice. Marcus McGee was supposed to fight, I believe it was Gaston Bolaños, if I'm not mistaken, the Muay Thai guy. But yeah, I mean, this is always going to be a tough fight for JP Buys. He's a primary grappler who's got heavy hands, but his striking isn't the best, and his striking defense is awful. He's gotten knocked out, including this one now, 4 fights in a row. Or not 4 fights in a row, because the Montel Jackson one went to decision. But he's gotten dropped in every fight multiple times, except this one. He went out and won. It only took 1 drop this time. But yeah, JP Buys was always going to struggle here. Marcus McGee is a tough dude to take down, and then on the feet, he was obviously going to be better than JP Buys, and he's got pretty big power for the bantamweight division. And JP Buys just does not have the durability anymore, which is sad because I believe he's still under 30. I mean, he's just had a tough time in the UFC so far. Unless he gets a really nice run outside of the UFC, I struggle to see him back in the UFC at some point. But, hopefully he can turn that around, get back on the regional scene and get some wins. But really good performance from Marcus McGee, 2-0 against 2 guys that he should beat. So it'll be interesting to see the step up he gets. And, yeah, I mean, I think he's looking really promising so far. I like what he's shown. So, yeah, interesting to see how he goes next, or how he does next. Next one we hit on was Josh Fremd versus Jamie Pickett. I didn't think there was really too much in this one. Jamie Pickett, he's got awful grappling defensively. He tries to shoot takedowns sometimes. He wants to push you up against the cage and hold you there. He's got okay power in his hands. He's an okay striker. His striking defense isn't great either. And he's not super physical unless he's more like physically imposing of a person than his opponent, so he's got to be bigger for him to be physical in the fight, and Fremd is not that guy. Fremd is massive. He was much bigger than Jamie Pickett, and it showed. Yeah, I mean, easy work for Fremd. It wasn't like a flashy performance or anything, but he was able to take Pickett down and get the win. Keep Pickett up against the fence at times, too. I mean, yeah, there really isn't much to say. Fremd was the bigger guy, and it showed. Next up, Dobson and Chukwi. One of the more popular underdogs, Dobson, for this week. I did end up going with him, and it ended up being a good pick. Chukwi made it tough the first round, I thought, with the leg kicks. I thought Dobson still ended up taking it. I thought he ended up doing more, just in general. Chukwi was landing good leg kicks, but nothing other than that. And then as the fight went on, Dobson was just a bit more active throughout, was landing the better shots, and Chukwi really never got his hands going. It was just a lot of body kicks and leg kicks. Dobson more active just in general. Able to get the win. He was just faster and more active, really, so ended up being a good dog pick there. Got the dub. And then Polyana Viana versus Yasmin Lucindo. I really like Lucindo. She's a solid prospect. Even in her debut loss versus Yasmin Jauregui, she looked really good, and it was a barn burner of a fight. They were just both out there throwing bombs. She ended up losing that one, beat Brogan Walker in her next opportunity, and now beats Polyana Viana by, was it second round, or did she get it done in the first? I think it was first, actually. No, it was second round. Second round submission for Yasmin Lucindo. She was landing. She kind of got tagged early in the first round. She didn't get wobbled or anything, but she got hit with a big shot. And then really that was all Viana did on the feet. Lucindo did well to get a takedown. Lucindo was landing big shots on the feet early in the second round too. She grew into the fight, and other than the big shot early, it was really all her. She looked good, and really good to get the submission victory over a submission artist in Viana. Next up, Roundtree Dawkins. This was another one I was surprised people were taking the dog shot at Dawkins. This one felt like Budai to me. I mean, Chris Dawkins is hittable. He doesn't have a good chin, and he was getting knocked out by big heavyweights. His advantage up at heavyweight when he was winning was his speed. Coming down a weight class, he doesn't have that advantage anymore. So now he's just an average striker who doesn't grapple at light heavyweight with a bad chin. So now these guys are as fast as him and hit harder. It just wasn't a good mix. It was never going to be a good mix. And to get Roundtree in your first go. One of the hardest hitting light heavyweights. One of the most violent light heavyweights. Tough go. And, I mean, it ended how I thought. Roundtree knocked him out in the first. I don't know if we'll see Dawkins again. It's 4 knockouts in a row. He went from this crazy streak from when he came into the UFC straight into the rankings. He hit a wall. I believe it was Derek Lewis that was the first one. If it's not, that was the second. But I don't know. His first loss, he got knocked out, and he hasn't gotten out of the first round since, I don't believe. Next up, we should have had a win on Dawodu, I still think. Tough, but whatever. And then Luque, yeah, my thinking going into this one was at 170, Luque was going to be the bigger guy always. I mean, RDA 5'8", not the biggest guy in general, so moving up a weight class to a natural welterweight, he lacked size in this one, and he wanted to wrestle, obviously. You don't want to go in there and strike versus Luque, although he didn't do too awful. It's just a tough ask to go and strike with Luque 4 or 5 rounds. So he tried to mix in his wrestling. He wasn't really able to get anything going. The size helped Luque keep the fight on the feet, and obviously he's got good takedown too, but the size advantage in this one definitely played a part. Then Luque realized he could go for takedowns since he had the size and strength advantage, and as soon as he started doing that, it was all she wrote. RDA really didn't have much of an opportunity to get up or cause issues on the ground after that, and Luque cruised to a win. So it was cool to see him get a win after that brain hemorrhage injury. Looked really bad, and now he's back. Awesome stuff. Let's get into the awards. No fight of the night for me. I mean, nothing really went long that could have been called a fight of the night, I don't think. I guess Swanson Dawodu was the main one you could have gone with, but it doesn't feel fight of the night worthy to me. So we've just got a few more than usual performance of the night bonuses. I went with Blackshear the first round, so I didn't even talk about it when I talked about the fight. It was a twister. The third twister in UFC history. How did I not bring that up? That's really why he is getting the performance of the night bonus. Obviously, a first round submission is great, but when it is the third twister in UFC history, a twister is ridiculous. So to pull that off, especially in the UFC octagon, really sick. And for it to be in the first round, no less. Performance of the night, easy. Good stuff from Blackshear. Next up, Isaac Dulgarian. I talked about it a little bit, all that hype, the build-up, waiting a year for him to make his debut after his first canceled fight in the UFC. Only 6-0, hadn't fought the best competition to come out and look like that against a guy who is a solid fighter in Francis Marshall, not the most experienced, but he showed he's a solid fighter in general. To come in and smash him in the first round on your debut is pretty sick. So good stuff from Dulgarian there. Next up, Marcus McGee. He was supposed to do it, but a great first round knockout, so you kind of got to give it to him. Next up, Yasmin Lucindo. Step up in competition from Brogan Walker, and she was able to get the submission. I'm really excited to see her continue to progress, and she's still so young. She's only like 21 or 22, so it'll be interesting to see her keep growing. And yeah, that submission was great, so great performance. Got to give her performance of the night. Next up, Khalil Roundtree, first round knockout. Really faced no problems, so good stuff from Roundtree. Great knockout. One big shot and then one follow-up. Didn't really even need the follow-up. Winners of the night, I'm going Dulgarian. I talked about it already. To smash Francis Marshall in the first round like that on your debut, really good stuff. He's got to be one of the winners on the night. Khalil Roundtree, he is on a 4-fight winning streak now. He'll finally get to fight up in the rankings. He had 1-2, and then he was... Oh, I gotta drink some water. Hold on. Sorry. He was on a 2-fight win streak. Then fought somebody outside the rankings, and then fought somebody coming down to the weight class for the first time while he was still in the rankings, and the guy was unranked in Chris Dawkins. So hopefully with that win, he'll finally get to look up. That's why I've got him in the winners. I do think he'll get to look up into the rankings finally. Next up, Vicente Luque. I talked about it. RDA is a tough matchup for anybody. That is a good victory on your resume. And then to do it after an injury as bad as a brain hemorrhage, that recovery must have been scary. Coming into the fight, he talked about it. He was scared to get hit. So, to get the victory done with that obstacle, pretty sick. Pretty cool stuff. So good for Vicente Luque. Losers on the night. Juliana Miller, tough winner. Now she's 0-2 and looked awful in both of her fights. It's been a tough UFC run for her so far. Next up, JP Buys. There's really not much to say about this one. 0-4 in the UFC. I believe it's 0-4. No, he's got a win. Does he? Now I gotta look. Let's see. JP Buys. Oh no, so he his only win with the UFC was on his Contender Series appearance. He got the first round submission, but after that, it is 4 losses in a row. I was right. So 0-4 in the UFC other than Contender Series. 3 of them being knockouts. It's been a tough run for him. And last one, Chris Daukaus, on a really rough streak. Like I said, the rise was pretty quick. He was looking really good, got up into the rankings, and now on a 4-fight knockout losing streak, 3 of which were in the first round. It's been a tough run. I don't know if we'll see him back in the UFC. Regardless, that is the recap for UFC Vegas 78. Tomorrow, I've got matchups for these guys. We're going Damon Blackshear, Martin Budai, Terrence McKinney, Marcus McGee, Yasmin Lucindo, Khalil Roundtree, Hakeem Dawodu, Cub Swanson, RDA, Rafael Dos Anjos, and Vicente Luque. And then also, tomorrow, we've got Contender Series Week 2. So as soon as that's over, I'll do a little recap video for it and talk about debut fights and stuff. So those 2 videos will come out tomorrow. And then Thursday will be UFC 292, O'Malley versus Sterling. Predictions, bets. I can't wait for that card. I'm so excited. So we'll see you guys tomorrow and Thursday for that predictions video. Peace out.